Welcome back once again, friends. In this video, we shall continue our journey to the world of Python. We are going to look at two extremely interesting functions. One is how do we find length of a given string, and two, how do we use this count method, which is a method of the string object. Count allows us to count how many times a particular, let's say, character or a smaller string appears in a bigger string, right? Now, we'll see all of this in context of the game that activity that we had been developing, which was this Prof's Grumpy Assistant. So let's go back there. Remember, our assistant is asking us a question in the beginning about what action words are called. If I answer this right or wrong, it asks us the next question, which is that give me an 8-letter English word with at least three vowels. Right now, as you can imagine, for this particular question, for the assistant to be able to determine if my answer is right or wrong, there is a bunch of calculations that the assistant must do, right? First thing first, the assistant must figure out how long is the answer that I provided, right? Basically, what is the length of the answer that I'm providing? And then within that, it must figure out if I have used at least three vowels or not, right? So let's see both of these, how we can do that. I'm going to just write some code. The first thing is how do we find length of a given string? In fact, that part is quite simple. So I can start putting together a very basic if condition. So notice that whenever we have a judgment to make, if else is the right way to go, as we had done previously too. So I can start writing the basic if condition, which is that if, let's say, len of word, right? Now len is basically number of items or number of, let's say, characters in the string, so it can tell us the length of the string as well, right? Now, remember, I'm using word here because my input here, I mean, the variable that I'm using is called word. So I have to just say it has to be an 8-letter word. So which means I can just put equals to 8. Notice I'm putting a double equal to because I'm checking here for equality, right? And next I must have this colon. I can have extra spaces, that doesn't matter if it makes more cleaner. I say, enter, and immediately an indentation is created as we have seen previously. So I can say, well, your, let's say, your word has 8 letters, right? Now, what happens if it doesn't have 8 letters, right? So basically, if this condition is not true, then in other words, if I go to the else and I put a colon, again, I need a colon. Remember from the previous lesson, I can just say, well, print, you seem to be a disaster. I mean, this remember this assistant is very hard to please, so you seem to be a disaster. Say str. Your word doesn't even have, say, let's say, print and again, you guys can be very creative here. You can add some messages that you wish to, but your word does not even have 8 letters, right? Now, so that part is quite simple. If we can just test this now, let's see if we just did this much. So it says, okay, give me what action words called. So I say verbs. It says, give me an 8-letter English word. So let's say I give a word which is, say, um, you know, say rotation, Tation, right? So now rotation has indeed 8 letters. So we expect to say your word has 8 letters, right? On the other hand, let's say I give it some other word. So again, I say verbs here. Give me an 8-letter English word. Let's say I give it the word letters, which clearly doesn't have 8 letters. So I expect to see you seem to be a disaster. Your word does not even have 8 letters. Because again, if then else came into picture, first I went into the if condition. Next, when the letters were not exactly 8, I went into the else condition. Now, the next question that comes up is, well, let's say I do have 8 letters in this word, because that was the question. Give me an 8-letter English word with at least three vowels, right? So now, if I have, let's say, eight letters, let's say in this, I want to figure out how many vowels have I got inside this string that has been provided to me, right? Remember, the word is basically a string. I want to find out how many vowels are present inside this. Now, for that purpose, I can make use of the count method, and the count method is basically, very simple to use. So I can just say, let's say I'll create a bunch of variables here. I'll say count a equals to, let's say, word dot count, and here I must tell what input, what word, what letter am I looking for. So remember, vowels are basically a, e, I, o, and u. So I'm just going to create 5 variables: count a, count e. I can just do that. So okay. Now my indentation has got messed up, so I must fix that because otherwise they'll not be part of this if and it'll cause a lot of confusion, right? So I'm going to just indent these things correctly. Notice they're all at the right indentation now. So the first one is A, next is E, next is I, next is O, next is U. But obviously I must go and change these as well. So I'm going to say, A, E, I, O, I, say E-A-E-I-O-N-U. So what this particular statement is going to do is that it's going to tell us in the word that has been provided, how many times does the letter A appear, right? Now, if you do a little bit more research, you'll find that in fact you can give more inputs to the count statement. You can even ask it to find from a certain range, right? So, for example, in count, let's say, find A after a certain index, right? And we can see some examples later. But for now, this is okay, right? So, because we have not looked at the indexing yet, right? So now I'm going to create one more variable here, which is just say count vowels, right? So count vowels, and that is just but nothing but the sum of count A plus count B plus count C plus count D plus count E. So I don't need the semicolon, right? So now this statement looks correct to me. Okay, so my mistake here is that because these variables do not exist, right? So it has to be count E, then count I, then count O, and then finally count U. Right. Now I can, just for my understanding, I can put a bunch of print statements. So basically, I'm going to say print count A, count E, count I, count O, and count U. And I can also say print in the next line, I can say print count vowels. Vowels, right? So that we know what's going on. And here I can give us, say, a single print statement, right? Now, if I did this, we can now try this code. So what's going to happen is that if my letter has 8 words, it's going to come in here and it's going to basically count how many A's existed, how many E's existed, how many I's, how many O, how many U's. It's going to add them all and tell me what is the total number of vowels in this particular word, right? And it's going to print all these things, right? Now, before I move forward, I do want to make a point that we have used the plus statement here. It's going to act like an addition here because though we didn't mention it, but the fact is that all this count A, count E, I, O, U are integers, which means they're numbers, and hence plus is going to act like an addition for them. This is something interesting in Python. We are going to see this later. That when it comes to strings, plus doesn't just add them. In fact, plus will join the strings, right? And we'll see that later. Yeah. So now let's move forward. Let's see an example of this. So say, for example, I come here. So first one is answer verbs. Give me an 8 letter English words. Let's say I go and answer, say, for example, rotation, right? So, if I give rotation, now what happens in rotation is that, yes, it has 8 words, it has 8 letters. I've got a single A. So let's just see this, maybe just zoom out a little bit. There you go. So I've got a single A here. I've got 0 E's. I've got A, E, I, right? I've got one I. I've got two O's over here and no U, which means my total number of vowels is, so this is A, E, I, O, U. The total number of vowels is indeed 4. Because, this is 2 plus 1 plus 1, right? Let's take another example. Say again, so it's going to ask me, okay, so it asks me, give me, so I say verbs, for instance, give me a letter word. This time, let's say I say stoppers. Now, again, stoppers has 8 letters, but it has got one E and one O. So, hence, it has got only two vowels, right? We can look at one more example here. Let's say circular, right? I'll give the word circular, right? Now, circular has, oh, sorry, I got it wrong. So, I have to answer circular over here, right? So, if I answer circular now, it's got three vowels, exactly three vowels. In fact, they are respectively A, I, and U. So there are three vowels, right? So notice how we are using the count statement to, find out how many of something exists in, let's say, a string. Now, just to give you an example, that I told you count can also indicate where you want to count. So let's say I create a test string here. Say test equals to, say I'll create this test string, maybe Python is cool. Let's say I create this string. Now, say I did, print, for instance, I say test dot count, and say I counted all the O's inside this, right? So I'm expecting three the answer to come out is 3 because, yes, it's indeed 3 because notice there is 1, 2, and 3 O's in this string, right? However, I can actually do a little bit more. I can go and say test count O. Say I want to count from index. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Say 6, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I want to count from say 6 to 13. It's going to count only in a limited range. And now I expect the answer to be 2 because when I do this, we'll look at indexing a little later, but basically the first O is not going to get counted, right? So this is how we can, sort of enhance the usage of count. We can count subsets of the string, given portions of a string, let's say, right? And we can count any, number, anything that we want. In fact, on this note, we can also see, let's say, if we had given count the occurrences of the letter is, for example, in, let's say, in this string, I'm expecting a 1 here because there's exactly 1 is in between, right? So you can put any substring and it's going to count for you, right? So that's the way this count works. I hope this was clear. Again, everything comes down to practice. So try to use this in your projects as much as you can, and things will become more and more clear to you. Just one parting note, the length word that we used here is in fact exactly same as what we had in Scratch in the operators, length of apple, right? It's going to tell you the exact same thing, which is the length of this string. I hope you found this useful. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.